Don't tell your friends that you're engraving photographs on wood, or your email is going to be full of photographs. Welcome back to LaserNug. You folks know that I'm brand new to the bolt, probably like many of you, and I've been working on photographs after the last video because I kind of got hooked on it a little bit, to be honest. I can't give you professional settings, but I will take you through a few of the settings I have used, and I'll show you some of the results. And if nothing else, you'll have a safe place to start that you can start working on photographs, and I'll give you a few tips that I've kind of figured out already. Stick around. What I found a little intriguing about testing out engraving photos on wood is the engraving provides depth, or a visual depth. Because believe it or not, the laser will take different shades in the photo and it will engrave at different depths. Whether it's a darker shade or a lighter shade, whether it's shade from the photograph or sunlight in the background, whether it's a mountainous range with a ton, just thousands of trees that you can literally feel with your fingers engraved into the wood, giving it that depth or almost that deep perspective of looking in. So I wanted to try a few other different pictures. A couple of things I will offer to you as you start. Whatever you choose for that first photograph, try not to pick a photograph where it's shaded, i.e. you're standing in a forest where there's bits of light, but you're largely shaded out. You want a photo that's reasonably clear. It's either all sun, preferably, or bright, or it's all shaded, which is not too preferred because the laser will actually pick up on the varying differences or variations in color. So preferably you want a clear picture. Second thing, if you're like me and you're terrible at taking photographs, you'll find that a lot of your photos have a white balance that is off. In other words, the photo more or less comes out at a yellowy orange as opposed to a white bright background. Try to stay away from those because again, the laser will pick up on the orangey background as opposed to a nice clear white balance in that photograph. The third thing, if you're using a photo, whether it's one that your friend just sent you because you told them you were engraving photos, or you're using one of your own family photos, maybe you're out on the snowmobile, when you take the photo and you put it on the desktop, try not to send it in a small file. In other words, when you're emailing photos, you'll find that it comes up on the screen just before the email goes, asks you if you want to send it in a small size, medium, large, or original. You want the largest resolution or the largest file possible. So usually your smaller or your medium files are going to be 100, 150 kilobytes. You want the ones that are 1, 2, 3, 4 megabytes. That's the size you want. And lastly, I used Baltic birch again. I did not use craft wood. So you may recall the original pictures I did was on 3 mil or 1/8 Baltic birch. The pictures I did since then, I've been doing on 1/4 inch or 6 millimeter Baltic birch. Let's get into it. We'll jump into Lightburn. The first thing I wanted to do is take you back to the last picture I showed you on the last video. That's how I kind of ended the video, I believe. If I come down, I just want to show you the image. That's the image, which I initially did. I worked on it several different times. And you'll see when you import the picture into Lightburn, it creates kind of more or less a black and white copy, for lack of better words. Now, before we go any further, I just wanted to remind you folks I am new at this. As you're watching other YouTube videos from people that are much more professional at doing the photography, you'll find that a lot of times they'll suggest that you have to take your original photo, import it into Adobe Photoshop or some such program, alter your white balance, flatten the picture, do a bunch of things to it to adjust it before you bring it into Lightburn. I don't have Adobe Photoshop and I've never used it. So this is just for us kind of newbie guys or newbie folks. You can grab a picture. That's all I've done with this. It was a large JPEG. I just imported it into Lightburn. And when you've got your picture in, you're going to want to size it to whatever size you prefer. In this case, I did 10 inches wide and 6 inches high. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to ungroup this picture because you'll notice I also put a cut border around it. I've ungrouped it. I'm going to go into the picture itself. I'm going to right click, and if you come down, you'll see Adjust Image. I'm going to click that. And if you haven't played with this yet, give it a shot just with any old photo. On the left is the original photo as it's currently sitting in Lightburn. And at the bottom of the screen are a bunch of different adjustments you can make to alter what you think this picture might look like. And this, I think, is where experience kicks in, because the way it looks on the screen here on the right is not what you're going to see on the wood. Things like contrast, detail, or shading, if you come down here, brightness, I'm still not sure what gamma means, the enhancement, all of these things, as you play with these radial buttons and these settings, you'll notice that the picture on the right changes. And I think as you try engraving pictures after pictures, as you're getting experience and you're testing out these different settings, you'll find ones that you really like or ones that really pop or give you the detail you need. But for the purposes of today's video, the one setting I wanted to show you, which worked out pretty good for me, is if I come under presets, I saved it as photo 1 as a preset, and you'll see that's going to change the settings at the bottom. I used the image mode called Stucky because there was 1 or 2 people that said Stucky was a great mode for photos. The good folks at Thunder Laser Canada said to also try an image mode called Jarvis. I'll show you that one in a sec. But here's my settings, which gave me this picture that you folks saw at the end of the last video. And I was pretty impressed with the clarity, the detail, and the contrast, because what you may not realize from the original photo is all 3 of us are actually standing in the shadow of the woodshed. And in the background is where you see the bright sun of the day shining across the forest. But it came out really nice for me using Stucky and with using these settings that you see below. I'll just give you a minute to take a look at those. If you take a look on the screen, you'll notice that if you play with the settings, for example, if I take contrast and I move it up, bump it up to, say, 21, you can see immediately the effect it's had on the right-hand side photo. I can drop it down to -16, and now you'll see that by contrast what it looks like. If you adjust your brightness, you'll see what it changes on the photo. If I adjust it back down, you'll see how dark it gets. Gamma does provide changes, but you'll see what it's done to the picture. I have to do a lot more work to understand what gamma means, but it definitely makes a big difference in the photo, as does the enhance amount. See how when you click that, you're almost seeing a much more defined outline around different objects in the picture. So I'd encourage you to play with them. If you need some safe settings that'll give you a beautiful output, just use these settings right here that I've saved as photo 1. It's over here on the left. I've used Stucky as the image mode. I ran this picture at 604 dpi. These are my settings for contrast, brightness, etc. And you click OK. And here's my power settings. If we head up here to the right, if I click on image, double click, I ran this at 250 millimeters per second at 35% power, 10% minimum power. And you'll see some of those numbers from the last screen have already been imported at 604 dpi. It's telling you you're using image mode called Stucky. Click OK. And I think we talked about this on the last video. You're going to see this come up. This is just a message or a warning from Lightburn. The bolt is able to do 2000 dpi, so we just click yes. And that's my cut layer, which we won't focus on today. And then we send it to the bolt. And you folks will remember, here's what the output was. I was really impressed with that output. It looked great. I was very happy with it, and I showed it to my buddies, and then they, of course, sent me more pictures to work on, because that's what happens. But I also want to take you into a second setting, which I'm also pretty impressed with, and we'll go through that now. It's using the image mode called Jarvis. So after I played around with a few different photos using Stucky and those settings that I just showed you, they all came out pretty good. So I wanted to try out Jarvis image mode. And I wanted to start off by showing you what the real picture looks like, and then I'll take you through my steps, if you want to hang around, and then I'll show you what the output was. So if we jump into the computer, this is the image of my friend and his lovely wife. Just going to blow that up so you can see it properly. Here's the beginning image. And what I'd ask you to just take a look at, if you can, is the detail in the folds of his jacket, the detail in the wood, which, by the way, if you take a look through the back of the wood here, you'll notice there's something engraved on the third slat down. You also want to notice that there's some shade from the sun, or I guess the bench is providing shade down here underneath these weeds by their feet and across to the right hand at the bottom of the screen here. You'll also notice the thousands of trees up this mountainside, or this hillside. And there's just thousands of them here. Different types of trees. You've got some evergreens or some softwoods here. And I'd like you just to take a look at the detail on these trees just to the left of my friend and his wife. And on the sky, if you look in the sky, you'll see there's a little bit of white hazing in here. There's a cloud here. And notice the different shades of blue in the sky. So with that in mind, let's see if I can get us out of here. I'm going to shut that down. Let's go back into Lightburn. This is what that same picture is going to look like when you bring it here into Lightburn. So similarly, I've put a cut line around it. So the first thing I want to do on this image is I want to ungroup it, highlight the image itself, right click it, come down here to adjust image. And here on the left is Lightburn's view of that photo we just looked at. You'll see here are the settings that we saved as a preset using Stucky as an image mode. And you'll notice I'm at 600 dpi roughly. Here are all my contrast and brightness settings, which I believe are the same. And I ran a first run on this picture using just these settings. I don't believe I changed anything, and if I did, I didn't change it too much, I don't think. Let's take a look at what it came out like. I ran that first run here, and it came out quite nice, actually. I only did it at, I think, 3x4, but you can feel there's a lot of detail in there, and in fact, I think it looks pretty nice. But then I decided to try Jarvis. We come back into this photo, right click it. I'm going to adjust image. And I also saved these settings, these new settings, as a second preset. So I come over here to the right side, I click on presets, and I called it Jarvis Photo Settings. And you'll see everything will change in a second. Now we're on Jarvis. I decided to do a second picture now at 5x7. I thought since I was increasing or enlarging the photo, I wanted to up the DPI or the resolution because I figured as I made the photo bigger, I wanted to see more of the detail because there's much more surface area. So I increased, you'll see here, my DPI has been increased to 1000. Here are my settings. I'll just give you a minute to take a look at it. And of course, here on the right side is what the computer is saying I've adjusted the image to. And if you just take a moment to look at that, you'll see lots of detail. You also may have noticed now a lot more of the engravings on the back of the bench have shown up, as well as the detail on the weeds, the trees along the mountainside, and the sky. So these are my settings which I'd offer you would want to try. Click OK. You'll notice that I did not change my image settings whatsoever. I just made the picture bigger, and the only thing I changed was the DPI, and it comes out to 1016. I typed in 1000, but you folks have probably noticed that Lightburn will adjust based on the line interval, or when it does that calculation. Air Assist is on, same power settings, and there's that note again. I say yes, I want to. And I ran this picture with a 1.5-inch lens. Take a look. That was the result. I'm not sure whether I like the Stucky or the Jarvis best, because I actually love this Jarvis effect. At 1000 DPI and a 5x7, there's your outcome. Beautiful engraved from my perspective. You can feel the depth, or at least see the depth of that engrave. Perhaps if I turn it, you'll be able to see, for example, the slots on the back of the bench, the stand of the bench, the trees to the right, and the detail or the depth of the trees up the mountain or the hillside. And notice the sky, what the laser does to the varying different shades of blue. Turned out really nice. Let's take a look at it in the magnifying glass. I'm hoping you can see some of that detail, or at least the different levels of engraving on the depth or the resolution on that photo. It's actually quite impressive. And just a quick look. The first image was 3 inches by 4 inches at 600 DPI. This one was a 5x7. I changed it to Jarvis and I upped the DPI to 1000. Same power settings, same speeds. So I had to take it one step further because I still had a little space left on my 1/4 inch Baltic birch. So I decided to stretch it to an 8x10. And given that it was a bigger surface area again, I thought I'd just give it a shot at 1800 DPI. Because the bolt can go up to 2000, as you know. And I was pretty impressed. As you watch this engrave, and I'll just give you some highlights of the engrave, you'll notice that as the laser is moving up from the bottom, you'll start to notice that as you're engraving at that high a DPI, on the left-hand side of the screen or of the picture, as the laser continues moving itself up the picture, you'll start to see that the left side becomes kind of white. It's almost like it's whitened out instead of brown anymore. And the reason for that is that your air assist is coming from the right side of the laser head and it's blowing the dust and residue to the left. So it's not that there's something wrong with the engrave yet, it just needs a little cleaning up. I'll just give you a quick shot of it engraving the 4x3 as well as the 5x7. I did not change the air assist or any of the power settings, but on both of those sizes at the 1000 DPI and below, there was no dust or debris built up on the left side of those pictures when it was done. I mean, I still gave it a little wipe, but you'll notice there's a stark difference as you get into a higher DPI, larger setting, much more detail. There's a ton of engraving going on there, and the dust and the residue has to go somewhere, so it gets blown to the left. So you can see there's a lot more cleanup as I pull this 8x10 out of the bolt. So after I've taken it out of the bolt, I recognized there was a lot of dust on there on that left side. So I took it to the air compressor, turned my air compressor up to 100 PSI, and I started blowing out the dust. And you can probably see here, to some degree, you can see the white dust or the color leaving the picture, and you're seeing that nice brown engrave underneath it. I took my sanding pad to the sides just to get off a little bit of that residue from the burn or the cut. I took it back, took the air compressor to it again, and then I wanted to get into the detail because the finite detail on this picture is outstanding. But I wanted to try to get all the dust out, so I didn't want to ruin the picture or mar the picture, so I took an old toothbrush. I'm sure you've got a few of those in the workshop. I just got it damp with some water, and I gave it a brushing back and forth to try to get those bristles into those tiny little engraved depths. And it worked really well. After I was done, I used the air compressor again just to dry it off, get it out. And here's what the end result was. Turned out quite spectacular, I have to say, for my 4th or 5th try at photographs. The depth and the detail on those trees, the branches, it's stunning, I think. Let's take a look under the magnifying glass. Hopefully that helps a little bit. I also wanted to point out, this 8x10 was engraved with a 2.5 inch lens. I swapped out the 1.5 before I did this bigger picture because I wanted to see if there would be a big noticeable difference or not, or whether or not I was able to get the detail I wanted. So to give you a bit of a comparison, On your left, the 4.3 was done with a 1.5 inch lens using Stucky image mode at 600 dpi. The picture in the middle, 5x7, was done using Jarvis at 1000 dpi and a 1.5 inch lens. And the big 8x10 was using the 2.5 inch lens at 1800 dpi using Jarvis and those settings I showed you. All run at the same power settings, both on the 1.5 inch lens as well as the 2.5 inch lens. Yeah, I'd be asking the same question. How long did it take? It's the longest burn I've done so far. The 4x3 took about 33 minutes, and that was at 600 dpi. The 5x7 took just over an hour, about an hour and 10 minutes at 1000 dpi. But the 8x10, including cut, was about 3 hours and 43 minutes. It was a long burn. But the bolt did its job. Now I got to clean it. I hope you found that helpful. If you haven't tried engraving photos yet, give it a shot. They're probably not the best professional settings, but they'll certainly get you some pretty nice output, especially if you're new at it like I am. I know that if you look at the link I'd given you on the last video for Malone's Creative Designs, there's a couple other steps he goes to, including one step in Lightburn that makes it flatten the image. I'm not sure what that does yet, and I haven't tested it, but I didn't do that step, as you've noticed on the video today, and I still got some pretty spectacular output for, a fifth or sixth time. If you've got some Baltic birch, give it a try. Thanks so much for sticking around. I'm going to grab my alcohol and my swabs, get these mirrors off and cleansed and the lens, and probably give the machine a wipe down. Have a great week with your families. Please be kind to one another, and I'll see you again right here. I'm Gord Potter, and you've been watching Laser Nug. Cheers.